In this video, the final assembly of our 1/18 scale working pinball machine. Hey everybody, it's Adrian from Zanz's Toys, and in this, our third and final video about our toy pinball machine, we're going to walk through exactly how to put it together. So here I have the final version with actual art and printed in some nice colors, and we're going to build this. Show all the 3D printed parts, all the 2D printed parts, and exactly how they all go together to make something like this. If you want to get the files for yourself, check out the links below, and with that, let's get started.
Let's talk about the 3D printed parts you'll need. For the back score display, you'll need one each of the back, the wheel, and the front panel. For the play surface and the flipper mechanism, you'll need one of play surface STL. You'll need one each of flipper bottom left and flipper bottom right. You'll need two prints of plunger .stl, two flippers, and four bumpers. For the main body of the pinball machine, you'll need one of the housing, two of the front leg, two of the back leg, one cup, and finally one panel top. I went with the black and silver theme. Obviously, you can print in whatever colors you like. I used silk PLA for the silver, and I really like it. It prints really nicely, and you get this slight, nice little sheen to it, which is really pleasant. I also went with black for the housing. This is going to mainly be covered with stickers, so, kind of do whatever you want. But I liked having some contrast with the silver. I do recommend choosing a bright color for your flippers and your plungers, though. This will be a nice accent to the silver. I also printed the flipper bottoms in the same color. That doesn't really matter because these are never going to be seen outside of the pinball. They're completely internal. But it just made sense to me to chunk these with the plungers and the flippers to have a relatively small plate that printed pretty quick. You'll also need some non-3D printed parts. We're going to need some plastic. So this is just from a package. If you look around your house, I can almost guarantee that somewhere, and you're probably sitting in your recycling bin, there's some nice flat sheet of plastic that you could repurpose. Nothing special about it, just any clear, flat plastic sheet will do. We'll also need a rubber band. So the kind of rubber bands I'm using are the same that I used for my oscilloscope video. And they're sold, I got these in a dollar store. They're sold as hair bands. And what's great is they're small, they're brightly colored, and they're really cheap. I paid like $1.50, I think, for a ton of these. One package will last you a long time. You'll also need a little bit of filament. My printers run 1.75 filament. Yours probably do too. But if you do happen to have a 3mm machine, you'll definitely need to get some 1.75 filament. If you need to get just a tiny bit of that, a good option is to get some 3D printer pen filament, which will give you a few sticks. The bonus there too is that it will be nice and straight. And we're going to use this basically for bearings and axles. And finally, you'll need some BBs. This is what we'll use for the balls. And what they are is just normal 4mm BBs. You can buy actual ball bearings, but they tend to be much more expensive, whereas these BBs are very, very cheap. Well, here's some actual ball bearings that I bought that are about the same size, and you'll see that the nice thing about them is they're a lot shinier. They can be kind of expensive. Just using normal BBs, you'll get a ton of them for very little money. Okay, so that's all the non-3D printed parts we're going to need. So let's talk about the 2D printed parts you'll need. All the 2D printed parts, I've just printed on sticker paper. So this is 8.5 by 11 normal size sticker paper. The trick, though, is be very, very careful when you print these PDFs. Make sure that you've got the print set to 100%. That it actually got cut off a little here. I'm going to fix this before I release the files. But the first time I printed this stuff out, my computer automatically scaled it down to 91%, which meant that all the stickers were too small. So watch out for that. Double check and make sure that you're printing at 100% when you print these out. So this is the decorative art for the housing and the back panel. This is all taken from various public domain sources that I got from publicdomainreview.org. I think today we'll go with Enrique Alvin Correa's Illustrations for the War of the Worlds from 1906. Pretty cool stuff. So we'll use that. You'll also need the play surface stickers. So we've got I've got multiples printed out here, but we've got one for the play surface, we've got one for the wheel behind the score display, and then we have these two little sort of accent stickers that say three balls, 25 cents, that we'll put on the play surface. We'll also need this glass template. So I just printed this once and I'm reusing it. It was printed on sticker paper, but I didn't actually take it off. That's another option. You could just use it as a sticker and put it on the plastic you want to cut out. But I just cut it out carefully once, and what I'm going to do is just tape this to the plastic and cut around it, and that'll be my template for the glass. So this shape fits into the top panel like that, and then we've got some glass, quote unquote glass, and our pinball machine to keep the balls from flying everywhere and to lock down the play surface. So we'll need our main decorative art. We'll need the play surface and the score wheel. We'll need our couple of little accent stickers, and we'll need our reusable glass template. I should also mention that if you grab the files for this, there'll be a blank version of this art, so that it'll just be these shapes, and you can take that in Inkscape and clip art to it, like I showed in my making of video, part 2 of the series. And so you can add whatever art you like. If you want something custom. So that's all the 2D printed parts. Okay, finally, let's talk about the tools you'll need. So you'll definitely need some scissors. You'll need some crosscut clippers. You'll need some super glue, an X-Acto knife. This type of X-Acto knife is especially nice for what we're going to be using it for, in that it's got a retractable blade, which is nice, but it also has a very small, a tiny little blade. This camera, I had high hopes for this camera, but it's really kind of blurry for this kind of use. So if anybody has any recommendations for a good camera for this kind of close-up work, please let me know in the comments. And it's always good to have a couple of files around. So a flat needle file is quite useful, and also a round needle file. And what I have here that I get a lot of use out of this, it's a bead reamer. So it's meant to be used for beading. I find it's just the perfect tool to round out small circular holes, like the kinds that I put into my designs for 3D printed filament to serve as an axle. Some of these are optional, but you'll definitely at least need scissors, super glue, an X-Acto knife, and the crosscut. Okay, so we're going to start with the back score display bit. So the first thing I like to do is we're going to need to glue some filament to serve as an axle into this hole. So the way that this is going to fit together is we have our back panel, and then this front panel snaps in. But we want this wheel to be inside there. And what it's going to rest on is some filament. So it'll be able to spin like that. So the first thing I like to do is to get that axle part of the way there. So we're going to put some filament through this hole. And it probably, if your printer's anything like mine, will need to be cleaned up a little bit. So I'm just gonna use this bead reamer or whatever you've got handy. Like I said, this is great. I got a set of these from American Science and Surplus. They were really inexpensive, and they're just perfect for this. So let's try that. Okay, so now that goes in fine. So what I'm gonna do is just put a little drop of super glue. So a lot of the times when I'm applying super glue, tiny things like this, surface tension is definitely your friend. So what I'm going to do is just use a little drop. So that was kind of way more than I meant, but I'm going to just kind of wipe it off with a piece of paper. And I did get a lot of extra super glue on the front here, but that's okay because this is going to be covered with a sticker. So I'm not too worried about it. But what I wanted to make sure happened was that this hole kind of was filled with super glue. And it's a small enough hole that surface tension will kind of do that for you. So what I'm going to do is stick this through. Then I'm going to use the crosscut to snip it off a little bit in front. So this is kind of loose right now. You'll see I left some extra filament out front of this, and I made sure that there was ample filament in the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that set up for a little bit. So I'm just going to set that aside. And next thing I'm going to do is work on our wheel. What that means is I'm going to start by cutting out the sticker. I'm definitely erring on the side of being inside the line a little bit. Because if your sticker is slightly too small, that's going to be okay. If it's slightly too big, though, it might make the wheel not rotate as well. Okay, so there we've got our sticker. Now I have to peel it apart. So this actually is a little tricky because the sticker paper just had one line on the back for the whole sheet. So most of the stickers you cut out won't have any easy way to remove the backing. So you just have to kind of patiently kind of work your thumbnail in, kind of pick at it until it gives loose. It's usually not too hard on this circular sticker, but just keep at it till it works. So now I'm going to put this on our wheel. Okay, our sticker's on, but we've covered the hole. So now what I need to do is I need to have something sharp. I'm going to use this bead reamer again, but a sharp piece of wire, kind of anything will do. And I'm just going to poke through the hole in the center. That starts the hole, but I want to clean it out. So what I'm going to do is kind of open it up a little bit, but I definitely want to come back in with my X-Acto knife. So there's a couple of places on the pinball machine where having a little extra sticker around the hole isn't going to be a problem, but this it actually would be, because we want this wheel to spin as easily as possible. So what I'm going to do is take my X-Acto knife and kind of just go around and make sure I clean up, I kind of cut off all the paper that was in the center. And you'll notice I'm kind of going at an angle. So I'm holding the X-Acto knife at an angle so it kind of shaves off the edge of the paper. And if I've done it right, I can test by putting this on a piece of filament and seeing how well it spins. So that's spinning quite nicely. Doing it in that order gives us just enough, the time it takes to put the sticker on and clean it up is generally just enough time for this to set up nicely. So this is good and firm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first off clip the extra filament off of the front. Oh, I should point out that this does have a front and a back. I should have pointed that out when I was putting the filament in, but there's a slight raised portion here. It's a little hard to make out again. I'm sorry for the blurry camera, but there's a slight raised portion, and that's the back. That's there to be a standoff for the wheel portion. The front should be completely flat. This is almost flat. The part's flat, but we've got this bit sticking out, right? So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to take my crosscut and snip it. And it was important to do that after the fact. Once the super glue is set up, it's perfectly fine to snip that down. But if I had tried to match the filament to make it flush with the surface while the super glue was not yet set up, that would have been really hard. So, you're not really wasting much by tossing, what is that, 5 millimeters of filament. So just stick it all the way through and let it set up, and then snip it down. And I'm also going to take my flat file and just kind of sand it down. So now I can draw my thumb over it, and this is very nice and smooth. Okay, so now we're ready to put on the sticker for this. So first off, I'm going to need to cut it out. And again, we're going with Enrique Alvin Correa's illustrations for the War of the Worlds from 1906. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the sides I cut very accurately. But I'm going to leave a little extra sticker at the bottom and at the top. And what that'll let us do is wrap the sticker all the way around the edge, and it'll be a lot more secure that way. So I'm going to have a little bit of extra there. And I'm just going to cut at an angle here to have a little bit of a tab. Now, one thing I want to point out that I'm not doing yet is I'm not cutting out the holes for the numbers. So the way this is going to work is once the wheels are in, the wheel, is mounted, you'll see that as it turns, the numbers turn, right? So that's one of the play features of the pinball machine. And we've got these holes, so we definitely need holes in the sticker, but trying to cut those out now and lining them up would be really hard. So what I'm going to do instead is just put the sticker on, and then once the sticker's on, I'm going to do kind of what we did on the wheel. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife to clean it up. So, okay, let's get the sticker on. So again, I have to kind of just work it with my thumbnail until it... Oh, I got lucky in that it just so happens that one of the line to peel off the sticker happened to be on this one. But okay, so now we've got our sticker. And the easiest way to line this up is with this edge here. So what I'm going to do is kind of like take this sort of like shoulder of the sticker and make sure that's lined up. And then put it all down. And now I can wrap this around like that. And I'll also wrap it around here. I'm going to just use my thumb to make sure that's nice and flat. Okay, so now we're almost done with the front panel, but we need to make sure that we have the holes that we need. The middle two numbers should be left alone. It's this 9 and this 0 that we want to punch out. So I'm going to do similar to what I did before. I'm just going to kind of use something sharp to get it started. Then I'm going to get my X-Acto knife and I'm going to just kind of trim it all out. And you can kind of feel for the plastic as you do it. So I'm kind of like letting the X-Acto knife blade feel the plastic and running along it. So now we have one hole, and I'll get the other hole. Okay, so now we have the front of our back panel with two holes. So if I take our wheel and put it on our bit of filament, now we can see that the numbers can rotate around and our score can change. Okay, so now we're almost done. All we need to do is put this whole thing, the front panel with the wheel, into here. Again, this hole probably needs a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to take my bead reamer, just kind of spin it a little bit. You kind of want a tight fit here. Another thing that helps with this step is I'm going to take my crosscut clippers and I'm going to make sure that this filament is cut at the tip of it is cut at an angle. So it kind of makes it sharp. It's going to help me push it through the hole. Let's see. Just gonna kind of work that in. There we go. Okay, so that's almost done. But we do want to apply some super glue. So what I'm going to do is just put a little dollop here at the back. And I also like to put a little bit here and here and a little bit here. You always have to be careful when you're adding super glue to something that needs to move. But generally, I find that what's nice about super glue is before it sets up, it's very liquidy. So you can kind of use that to your advantage to get it to kind of flow into tight spaces through surface tension. One thing I like to do is at this stage, I kind of contest it by if you blow into here, you should hear it spinning. So yeah, I just blew and it spins very nicely. So one of the reasons I really like using filament as axles is that it's such a slick surface that it's actually a really nice bearing. So it's works out really well. And if you're doing any 3D printing, you generally have a lot of little bits of filament left over. You know, so this filament I'm using here is transparent filament that has actually gotten a little bit old. So every time I print with it, I get not great results, and it looks a lot whiter than translucent. So, but it's great for something like this. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'm going to let this set up a little bit, and then the one last thing to do for the back is just to clip down this bit and maybe sand it a little bit. So let's just clip that down. There we go. And that's one back assembly done. Okay, so let's work on the play surface and flipper mechanism. So the very first thing I'm going to do is both of the flippers need to get some axles added. And similarly, we'll need a little bit added to our flipper bottom. I'm going to start with that because that'll give us time for the super glue to set up while we work on some other things. Make sure, if you haven't already, to kind of take your filament and kind of work it in your fingers slowly. The warmth of your hand is generally enough, if you're just kind of gentle with it, to kind of straighten it out. It doesn't have to be completely straight. We want to get rid of the natural bend that comes from filament that's been on a spool. So that's good enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flipper, and in this hole, I'm going to put just a tiniest bit of super glue. And I'm going to get the filament, a little extra filament, and just stick it in. And I'm going to give myself a generous amount of filament, maybe 20 millimeters or so. And I'm just going to set that aside. So I'm going to do that one more time with my other flipper. So I didn't really clean up the hole much on this flipper because I want this to be a tight fit. So some of these places where filament interacts with a 3D printed piece need to be tight, and some of them are meant to be bearing surfaces. So this is meant to be a permanent tight bond. So if it's a little tight, that's fine. And again, I'm going to give myself a couple of centimeters and clip it off. So the way that this works is this is going to go through the hole there, right? And then what we're going to do is place the flipper bottom onto the filament like this. So that's going to fit. I'm going to take this off so it doesn't glue to the play surface. But that's going to fit like this. And then what we need is here in this other hole. So this hole is going to be used to glue the flipper bottom to make a secure connection between the flipper bottom and the flipper. And then this hole is going to be used to attach some filament pointing up so that the plunger can push. That'll make more sense as we go, hopefully. But the upshot of that is we need to do similarly to how we added some filament to the flippers. We need to add some filament to this outside hole. So I'm going to just put a tiny bit of super glue and push some filament through. Now, what we're going to end up wanting is this to be it pointing in the same way that this peg does. So we have a peg here and we want another peg here. The reason I didn't 3D print a peg here is because it needs to be thinner, and trying to 3D print something vertically at this size is pretty much a recipe for failure. It would almost certainly snap off. So this I could make thick enough to be reasonable to print, but this needed to be really thin. So that's why it's just a bit of filament. So similarly to what I did for the back panel, I'm going to snip this off. Even though I ultimately want this to be flush, I'm going to leave a little extra while the super glue sets. So there's that part. And I just need to do it again, the same thing to this flipper bottom. I should maybe point out that I'm putting the super glue on the surface that I'm pushing through. So I put the super glue on this side, and I also pushed the filament through that side. And the reason for that is that kind of makes, as the super glue gets drawn by the filament, it'll go inside here and make a nice firm connection. I could have done that from the other side, would have been fine, but whichever side you add the drop of super glue from is the side you want to push the filament from. So again, this is really loose right now, but I'm just going to clip that off. Okay, so our flippers and flipper bottoms can be left alone to set up. Next thing I want to do is we need to, kind of like the wheel sticker, we need to go ahead and apply a sticker to the play surface, because we won't be able to do that once the flipper mechanism is installed. I'm going to get my sticker and just cut it out. And similarly to the panel for the back score display, I'm not going to even attempt to cut out these holes. So I'm going to just put the sticker on, and then I'll punch through and clean up the paper a little bit to make sure that the holes are perfectly aligned. There's no way to have them misaligned that way. Whereas if I try to cut them out now, it's highly likely that they'd be at least somewhat misaligned. So we don't want that. Okay, there's the sticker cut out. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to cut out these two small accent stickers. These two little triangles that just make it a little more fun and a little more Pinball Machine-y. Man, I see how blurry this is. Please, if anybody has a good rec on a camera for this kind of work, please let me know. And hopefully, but the next time I make a video like this, I can make it much more clear. So these are definitely the hardest stickers to deal with. So I'm just I got lucky that time. This came right off. So go ahead and apply this into this sort of divot. I find it's nice to have some sort of tool, just a stick of some kind, to kind of push it down. So there's that sticker. If it's not cooperating, it's good just to try a different corner. Sometimes that helps. There we go. Okay, so now we've got that. Okay, that is by far the hardest sticker to deal with. So everything else is pretty straightforward, sticker-wise at least. So now I've got the main play surface sticker. There we go. Oh, looks like I could have been easier because this one actually has the line. Okay, so here's our sticker. So the way you want to line this up is, again, sort of at this bottom. So this line on the sticker, right there, right here, there's a line there. It might not show up on the camera, but there is a line in actual art. And if you kind of line that up and wrap it around the bottom here, that should get the rest of the sticker in alignment. So get that nice and flat and wrap this around there. Gonna use the back of this file just because it's a nice flat cylinder to kind of work in these edges here. Make sure they're tamped down nice and flat. And you can probably guess what happens next. I'm gonna poke through the holes and clean them with some sharp implement and then clean them up with an X-Acto knife. So you could do it from behind, but it'll give you a worse result. So what I'm gonna do is just carefully kind of feel around, and then once you find a little bit of a give that lets you know you've hit the hole, just go ahead and push through. So just feel around, and there it is, push through. I'm gonna do the same thing here, and here, and here, and here. There's two types of holes here. There's these two holes, which are for the flippers, and then these four holes, which are for the bumpers. So the bumpers actually don't want to move. So if there's a little bit of extra paper there, that's actually kind of a good thing. It'll make this a little bit tighter. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. But the flipper holes need to be nice and loose. So I'm going to be very careful to make sure I really open those up all the way. A good conical cylindrical file like this is kind of perfect for it. But I'm also going to make sure I get my X-Acto knife, clean up those edges, and actually get rid of the paper. You want this as loose as you can get it. Don't cut away the plastic. The plastic should be, assuming your printer's nicely calibrated, the plastic should be just fine, but we don't want any paper getting in this hole. Okay, so that's good. I'll give these just a quick once over just to make sure the holes all, but I'm kind of not bothering to really clean out all the paper for these, because again, that's actually kind of a bonus. If a little paper kind of wedges in between the hole and the bumper, that's okay, and it'll just lead to the bumper being a little tighter. I do want to make sure that the paper's not outside of the hole though. Okay, so that's the play surface prepped, and with all that, our previous pieces should be nice and set up, and we can feel that this is really nice and rigid. Okay, so now we're ready to actually get to the flipper mechanism. First thing I want to do is these are all set up now. So one thing I need to do is I need to trim this down. Now be very careful in that we've got two pegs here, essentially. We've got the peg that was 3D printed as part of the part, which is gonna hold the rubber band. Then we've got this peg, which we added with a piece of filament, and that's gonna go into the plunger. So this is gonna go like that. But this side needs to be removed. So we're gonna take this side off with flush cutters. And I am gonna use a flat file to kind of sand this down a little bit. Make it nice and flush. Okay. So now we've got something that looks like this. We've got a peg that was printed and a peg that we added with a piece of filament, both pointing in the same direction. Very important. And we've got nothing in this middle hole. I'm going to do that for this one too. Now I'm going to take a flipper. I'm going to do this one at a time. Let's start with the right flipper. So I'm going to take my flipper and just drop it through the hole. Make sure it's, make sure it turns nicely. There shouldn't be much friction at all. So if there is friction, make sure you clean up this hole a little bit before you put the flipper in. Now I'm going to flip it over. And I need, this is for this side, I need this part. So, okay, so that's what it needs to look like. So what I did is I just took our flipper bottom and put it over the bit of filament that's attached to the flipper and pushed it all the way down. A couple of things to note. These are sided, so they need to end up looking like this. And the reason for that is the way the flipper mechanism works is we push in from here, which makes this, so pushing here with the plunger turns it, and this eventually bumps up against the housing. But that's what lets us get all that nice play of the flipper. So another thing that can kind of be tricky about this is you want to make sure that, and so far we haven't glued anything, so it's totally fine. But the default state of the flipper bottom should have this part lined up with the housing. And we want to make sure that in that state, the flipper is all the way down. So you can kind of like keep a finger on the flipper as you're pushing this in. So you want to make sure, very important to get this right. What we're about to do is glue this to this piece of filament. And once that's set up, we're not going to have a way to change it without just removing the whole flipper mechanism. This needs to be this side parallel to the side of the play surface, and the flipper needs to be all the way down. We've got both of those things. So I'm going to take super glue and just put a little tiny bit right here. I'm going to let that set up. Be very careful here. If you get too much super glue, it'll flow and it'll seize up this whole mechanism. So what you want to do is just have a tiny little drop of super glue and let it kind of work its way in, again, through capillary action or surface tension. Another way to do it is you might, if you've got sort of like, you could just squirt out a little bit of super glue and take a tiny, I wouldn't say you want to use a brush because that brush will be useless. But you could maybe take a tiny little bit of cardboard and kind of poke a little bit of super glue in there. So I'm going to do that for the same thing for the other side. So again, I'm going to take my filament. I'm going to take my flipper, put it down through there, kind of keep a finger on it so I can feel that the flipper is all the way down. Take my flipper bottom. If it's a little hard to work through, you can do the same thing we did before, and then I'm going to clip this filament at an angle so we get a nice sharp thing, and I'm going to push that through. And I kind of intentionally didn't clean up either of these holes because you really don't want them to be that loose. If it's a little tight to begin with, that's great. And that just means that even we're still going to add some super glue, but having kind of a tight grip is going to make this whole thing that much stronger. So again, before I super glue, I'm going to double check that my flipper is all the way down, all the way against here, right? It's not like that. We don't want that. We want this. So all the way down. And I'm also going to check that the flipper bottom, this side without the 3D printed peg, the side with the peg that we added with filament, is parallel to the play surface. So that's all good. So I'm going to take a little bit, super glue, just a tiny little bit where the filament meets the flipper bottom. And I'm going to let that, so I always want to make sure I just work it back and forth a little bit. Make sure that it's, I haven't glued the wrong things together. and that should be good. So if we turn it over and I kind of press on, so what I'm going to do is just press on this peg that we added, we can see that the flipper goes up. And if I do the same thing from the other side, the flipper goes up. So we need something to make the flippers return, and that's where these pegs come in. We're going to add a rubber band there, but I don't want to do it until the super glue has had a little bit of time to set up. So I'm going to actually just leave this alone for a couple of minutes. While we're letting that set up, I'll demonstrate how the flipper mechanism works from the bottom. So we've got the plungers, and both of these plungers have holes, and this hole fits those pegs. What we'll end up with is these plungers push and move, force this to rotate, and in rotating, they move the flipper. And then the rubber band pulls it back, which also pushes the plunger back out. So we'll have proper pinball action. And these aren't going to be joined in any other way. They're just held by this peg. We'll see that when we do the final assembly. Now, and if we flip it over, we can kind of get a hint of what it's going to look like. And that if I push this peg, right? It's a little hard to do without the housing, right? But if I push this peg, flipper goes up. If I pull it, the flipper goes back. So push, flipper up, pull, flipper down. But we're not going to actually pull it, right? Because that's not how pinball works. Again, we're going to rely on the push to put the flipper up, and then the force of a small rubber band to bring the flipper back down. Okay, so this is probably set up. So I need to do a little bit of cleanup. So we've got a lot of extra filament here. So there's another thing that's very careful. You want to be very careful about. We want to clip down the middle axle to a very small amount, but we want to leave a good amount on this. So what I'm going to do is clip this down almost flush, not quite flush. If I clipped it flush, I'd be worried about the clipping off the part that had actually been glued to the flipper bottom. So we want to make sure that's a strong joint. So I'm not going to clip it flush, but I'm going to clip it down very small, because this has already done its job. All it needs to do is provide a secure connection between the flipper and the flipper bottom. Now this part, we need to clip down, well, let's do it this way. So something about like that, is it needs to reach down and mate with the plunger. Actually, we can kind of do that. If you just kind of hold the plunger to it and then clip flush, that should be fine. Yeah, I'll just do that. I'll put the plunger on and use that effectively to measure that. We've got these clipped very short and these clipped a little bit higher. And that's almost it for the play surface. But one last thing is I want to put the bumpers, because it's not really pinball without bumpers, right? So what I'm going to do for that is just put a little dollop of super glue on the top here and kind of push the plunger in. Let's flush. Kind of make sure you look at it from an angle to kind of make sure it's sticking straight up. And again, having a little bit of paper there actually makes this easier, not harder. And that's it. So now we've got our play surface all done, and we're just going to leave that alone for a little bit to let this super glue set up. Okay, so now let's prep the housing. So what we need to do is attach our legs and the cup to hold the balls that fall through. So we've got the legs are a little bit different. We've got slightly shorter front legs, so these are the front legs, and slightly longer back legs. So that's going to give us the nice angle that we need to make sure the ball runs down. So I'm going to flip out over the housing, get a little super glue, and we've got 4 holes here, 4 square holes. I'm going to put a little dollop of super glue in the hole and just kind of wipe the tip a little bit in front of the hole. So I'm going to do that for both the front holes. And I'm going to grab my front legs and just poke them into the hole and kind of hold them against it a little bit. It's very easy to glue your fingers on this part. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the back legs. So just a little bit of glue and the legs. If your printer is anything like mine, you probably get a little bit of elephant foot where the surface that was on the bed gets a little bit expanded. So watch out for that here, because what it'll do is it'll tend to push the legs at an angle. So make sure you get the legs nice and straight. That gives us our legs. So just in case it's not clear, the back, it has this gap for the balls to come through and these two holes for the back assembly to mount to, like so. And then the front has the holes for the plungers and the holes for the cup. So let's go ahead and put the cup on too. Okay, I'm going to let that set up for a little bit. While that's setting up, I'm going to cut out some stickers. I'm going to apply both the stickers for the sides of the housing, and I'll go ahead and put the stickers for the sides of the back. So I'm going to go ahead and put the stickers on the back. I'm going to give this a little more time to set up. And a lot of these stickers, at least the ones I've made, and the ones, and possibly the ones you'll make, definitely have like a left and a right. So I think I'm going to put this on this side, because this part is this part of the sticker is a little brighter. So I'm going to have the brighter side there, and this is a little bit darker. So I'm going to put that over here. But you know, it's whatever you think is best. Here we go, finally. Could have made that easier on myself. Okay, so this just goes just a rectangle into a rectangle. That's pretty easy to line up. Okay, so we've got that. So I'll get the sticker. I think actually, yeah. So this just happens to fall in on the sticker line. So that's nice and easy. And I'll put that on. Okay, so now we've got our stickers there. Let's see how this is doing. This, I think, is pretty set. So let's turn it over. It seems to stand just fine. So let's put these stickers on. So the way that these work is this gap here is to accommodate the hole for the plunger. So this sticker goes on this side, and this sticker goes on that side. So let's do that. There we go. Okay, so this sticker will go here. Smooth that down. I'll turn around. And this sticker will go. Okay, and this sticker will go here. Okay, so now we've got our housing all stickered up with the legs and cup at it. And now what we're going to do is actually put these two parts together. And it's going to start looking like a real pinball machine. What I'm going to do is get some super glue. And I want some super glue I'm going to be a little bit generous here. I'm going to put some super glue kind of all over here. And I'm going to use these two pegs to align with the back surface. And I'm going to kind of wiggle it around a little bit to spread the super glue between the surfaces. Now what's nice is you can kind of just take your thumb in between the pegs, so right here, and hold it like that. And that's a really good way to exert some nice pressure to get these two parts to really bond well. So I'm just going to hold it like that for just a little bit until the super glue starts to set up. Okay, you know it's setting up when your finger starts to stick. So yeah, what I like to do is once this is set up a little bit, I add a little bit of extra super glue just right in here to where those pegs come in. And just, let that work its way in. Okay, so now we're getting really close. So that's our whole housing put together with the back panel. And I'll set that aside. So now we're gonna make the glass. So I've got the panel top piece. I've got a piece of plastic from a takeout container. And I have my glass template. So what I'm gonna do is just tape this down. Just gonna tape this down to the plastic and then start cutting around it. You shouldn't need any kind of special scissors or anything to cut this kind of really thin plastic. Be careful to not cut through the tape just yet. And then I'm gonna make sure I cut all the corner bits out. This is slightly awkward, but it's important to make sure that the glass covers everywhere, but also is held securely by the panel top 3D printed part. Okay, for these, I want to make sure I make the hole, actually, if anything, a little bit larger than the template. Because if it's a little too small, what'll happen is this bit of the plastic will bunch up, and it won't ruin anything, but it'll just, make things not work quite as well as you'd like them to. Okay, so now that I've got that pretty much all done, I'm going to take the template off and just cut off the bit that was holding the tape. Just a straight cut. Okay, so now this should fit quite nicely into our panel top. And it does. So that's all cool. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use a little super glue to hold these things together. Put a little along the edge here, along this edge. And you don't really need to go overboard or anything, just a little bit to hold the plastic kind of in is good. Okay, so there's our glass for the pinball top. Okay, now it's time for the final assembly. We've got our housing and back panel. We have our play surface. We have our glass panel. And we have, very importantly, our flippers. So the first thing I want to do is now making sure that my flippers still work, which is great. I just need to finish this off with a rubber band. So I'm going to get my rubber bands, pick one. Let's go with, fine, we'll go with this magenta. This is a pretty small rubber band, but we actually need it to be a little bit smaller still. So I'm going to just double this up by looping it around. And then put that around these two pegs. And there we go. There's our flipper mechanism totally done. So if I push on these, we can see that they spring back. And if we look at what that looks like from this side, we can see it's flippers that flip up and then return down. So now we're ready to do the final assembly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the plungers with the holes pointed in and just kind of set them through these holes loosely. Now I'm going to take the play surface and place it in here. And what's tricky is you want to make sure you just kind of work the plunger a little bit until the peg that we installed earlier sits down in this hole. And you'll see that one of the plungers fell out. That happens. It's okay. Once it's all in, it's pretty secure. So I'm just going to lift this side up, kind of put it in again, work it, and let's see. There we go. So we've got working flippers. So cool. We've got right flipper, left flipper, both flippers, everything's good. But this is really loose, right? So that's where this comes in. So all we have to do is snap this on. You can super glue this, but it's not necessary. It shouldn't be necessary. And there we are. There's our pinball table. So now this part will hold the play surface down. You can kind of see here in the corner maybe that the tabs that hold the panel top to the housing also keep the play surface from moving up. So if I just hold this by the back and work the flippers, there we are. One finished 1/18 scale War of the Worlds themed pinball machine.
Okay, that was a really long video. So if you're here, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more long form videos like this, please let me know in the comments. Channel's still pretty new, so I'm still trying to figure out what works best. So if you think this was too long, let me know. If you'd like to see more long form content like this, let me know that too. If you want to get the files and make a pinball machine of your own, just check out the links below and get set up with all that. And thanks so much for watching. If you want to see more content like this on toy design and toy making, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time. Thanks so much.